Let me start with the thing most people don't want to hear because it's annoying, and it's also a relief at the same time. A lot of Etsy listings don't stop working because you messed up. They stop working because the listing slowly loses its footing. And when that happens, you can't point to one button you pressed and say, "That's the day it died." It's more like the floor gets slightly slippery over weeks, and you keep trying to walk faster to fix it. And the faster you walk, the more you slip. If you've ever had a listing that used to get steady views, steady favorites, and then it just fades, this video is basically about that. Not SEO tips, not do this one trick. Just what actually breaks listings over time, in real life, in a normal Etsy shop, when you're trying your best. It almost never snaps in one moment. That's why it's hard. If it snapped, you'd notice, and you'd fix it, or you'd move on. What usually happens is you see a softer week, then another softer week. Then you start checking more often. You check your stats, then you check again, then you check what you changed last time. And because it's gradual, your brain goes looking for causes. Maybe Etsy changed something. Maybe there's more competition. Maybe your niche is dead. Maybe you need new keywords. And sometimes those things are true, sure. But the pattern I see again and again is that the listing doesn't die because of an external event. It dies because it never gets a stable environment long enough to prove itself. It keeps getting nudged, reset, and re-aimed. And over time, it becomes this listing that never fully settles. And I get why. Like, if you're a seller, you're not sitting there thinking, "I'm going to sabotage my own listing today." You're thinking, "I need to be responsible. I need to be proactive." You see the numbers dip, and you go, "Okay, let me improve this. Let me make it clearer. Let me make it stronger. Let me make it more searchable." So you tweak a title. You adjust a couple tags. You rewrite a line in the description. You add a keyword you think you missed. You swap the first image because maybe it's not grabbing attention. And none of that sounds crazy. It sounds normal. It sounds like what a good seller would do. The problem is not that you're doing work. The problem is what that work does to stability over time, because each change feels tiny. It feels safe. You're not deleting the listing. You're not changing the product. You're just improving. And it's really easy to get trapped in that mindset where the listing becomes a project you keep reworking. Like a document you keep editing. And you tell yourself, "I'm almost there. I just need to tighten this. I just need a better keyword. I just need a better hook." And in the short term, sometimes you even get a little bump. That's what makes it tricky. You tweak something, and you get a small rise. And you go, "See? Optimization works." So you do it again. And again. But what you're actually doing is training yourself to intervene constantly. You're creating a listing workflow where the default response to uncertainty is edit. Here's the thing that doesn't get explained clearly enough. Etsy isn't only reading your text like a person reads a page. Etsy is watching behavior. It's watching how shoppers interact with the listing, how often it gets clicked when it shows up, whether it converts when it gets clicked, whether people favorite it, whether they bounce, whether they buy. That behavior creates a pattern. And patterns take time. When you keep changing the listing, you keep changing the conditions under which the behavior is being measured. So the system is trying to understand something that keeps moving. And again, it's not punishment. It's not Etsy saying, "How dare you edit?" It's just the reality of how systems learn. Stable inputs create clearer signals. Shifting inputs create noisy signals. And instability is sneaky because it doesn't feel like you did anything extreme. It just accumulates. A title rewrite here, a tag shuffle there, a new image order, a new first line. Maybe you change the category or attributes because you found advice in a group. And each time, you think you're helping. But what you're actually doing is preventing the listing from staying one thing long enough to build momentum. A listing needs time to settle into its own groove. It needs consistent data. It needs enough impressions under the same structure for Etsy to place it confidently, and for buyers to respond consistently. If it keeps changing, it keeps restarting that settling process. It's like moving a plant into a new pot every few days and wondering why it never roots properly. This is where people start to lose their confidence, because performance starts to feel random. You'll get a day of views, then nothing. A couple favorites, then silence. One sale, then 2 weeks of nothing. And the worst part is, you can't tell what worked, because you changed 3 things. Then you waited 2 days. Then you changed 2 more things. So now you have a listing with mixed signals and a seller with mixed memory. You don't know what the listing looked like when it performed best, because it's been edited so many times. And when you can't see a clear cause and effect, you start chasing. You start chasing the feeling of control. You start chasing certainty. And then intervention becomes the habit. You wake up, you check stats. You feel that little drop in your stomach, and you go fix something. Not because it's broken, but because you're uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that to judge. It's just human. Uncertainty is stressful. So your brain wants an action. An action feels like progress. But in this specific situation, constant action can be the thing that slowly breaks the listing. Because the listing never gets to just be itself. It never gets stable enough to be evaluated cleanly. And over time, it becomes a managed listing, not a performing listing. It's like you're steering every second, instead of letting the car go straight. So let's say it clearly. Etsy favors consistency. Not consistency as in post every day or keep grinding. I mean consistency in signals. Consistency in what the listing is about. Consistency in how it shows up, how it gets clicked, how it converts. When a listing is stable, Etsy can test it properly. It can show it in certain places, gather enough data, and decide where it belongs. When a listing keeps shifting, Etsy is always back in the testing phase. And some listings can survive that, especially in high-demand niches. But most listings don't. Most listings need stability to build trust inside the system. Think of trust here as confidence, not morality. Etsy develops confidence in a listing that behaves predictably. When you change something meaningful, you're telling the system, this is slightly different now. And that's fine, but it means the system needs to re-observe. And if you do that repeatedly, your listing spends a lot of its life being re-observed instead of being rewarded. And this is where sellers get stuck. Because they're like, I'm working harder than ever. Why is this worse? And the answer is, because the work is pushing the listing back into uncertainty, over and over. The listing never gets to compound. It keeps returning to, maybe. So at a certain point, optimization quietly turns into interference. You're no longer making the listing clearer. You're just changing it. And that change might even make it slightly better in one way. But the cost is instability. And instability is expensive. It's expensive in time because you're constantly editing. It's expensive in mental energy because you're constantly worried. And it's expensive in performance because your listing never gets enough steady time to build momentum. If your listing is already structurally solid, constant tweaks are usually not the lever you think they are. They become noise. Another thing that breaks listings over time is how sellers read the data. Most Etsy sellers are watching short windows. Yesterday, last 7 days, last 2 weeks. And those windows are emotional. Because a slow week feels like danger. But Etsy performance naturally fluctuates. Traffic shifts, buyer demand shifts, competition shifts, holidays shift. Even a small algorithm adjustment can shift impressions. The mistake is assuming every dip is a problem that needs immediate correction. Some dips are just weather. If you treat weather like a structural failure, you rebuild the house every time it rains. And after a while, the house is a mess. This is why structure matters more than tweaks. Structure is the big stable skeleton of the listing. The product intent is clear. The buyer is clear. The offer is clear. The images tell the same story as the title. The description supports the decision. The tags reinforce the intent. When that structure is stable, the listing can ride out small fluctuations. But when structure is unstable, every fluctuation feels like confirmation that something is wrong. And that pushes more edits. So the goal is not to freeze everything forever. The goal is to create a structure you trust, and then stop interfering with it every time you feel anxious. This is the part that sounds harsh, but it's actually empowering. A lot of listing damage is self-inflicted. Not because you're careless, because you're trying. You're trying to fix things quickly. You're trying to do what people say works. You're trying to be active. But the hidden cost of constant adjusting is that you break the stability that the listing needs. And once stability is broken, you don't just fix it with another tweak. You rebuild stability by holding the structure steady, long enough for signals to become clean again. It's slower, it's calmer, it feels less satisfying in the moment. But it works better over time. The sellers who scale, the ones who end up with listings that just quietly sell for months, they usually have a different relationship with urgency. They don't treat every dip as an emergency. They're not emotionally married to daily stats. They don't change 5 things at once. They're calmer. They make fewer moves. And when they do make a move, they let it sit long enough to learn something real. That calm is not personality. It's a system. It's a choice to reduce randomness. And reducing randomness is what makes everything easier. Analysis, consistency, growth. Stability compounds in a really boring way. No fireworks, no viral moment. It's just that a stable listing produces cleaner behavior, and cleaner behavior produces clearer placement, and clearer placement produces steadier traffic. And when you have steadier traffic, your confidence comes back. And when your confidence comes back, you stop doing frantic edits. And when you stop doing frantic edits, the listing stays stable. It becomes a loop in the right direction. That's what people mean when they say momentum. Momentum is often just stability held long enough to compound. So if you take one practical rule from this, it's this. Intervention should be deliberate, not reactive. If you're going to edit a listing, have a specific reason that relates to clarity or buyer intent, not fear. Make one meaningful change at a time. Then leave it alone long enough to observe properly. And if the listing is structurally sound, don't edit just because the numbers made you uncomfortable for 3 days. That's not strategy. That's anxiety management. And again, I'm saying that as someone who gets it. This stuff is stressful. But the goal is to create a shop where your actions are measured, not panicked. If I had to boil the whole thing down, it's this. What breaks Etsy listings over time is chaos that slowly enters the workflow. Too many edits, too much reaction, too many changes without enough time to see what they did. The listing becomes unstable, the signals become noisy, and the seller starts chasing. Clarity beats chaos. Stable structure beats constant tweaking. And if that way of thinking helps, more explanations like this are coming to the channel.